Welcome to the PropLinq AI podcast, where we speak with visionary leaders at the intersection of real estate, data, and innovation. I'm Stuart Quintal, founder of PropLinq AI, an AI consultancy helping property businesses modernise how they generate leads, manage workflows, and adopt smart systems. Today, I'm joined by Michael Katz, CEO of RELA, a marketplace that's redefining land valuation in the climate transition era. Michael's based in Sydney, and his company is helping regional landowners unlock new revenue streams by factoring in decarbonisation and energy infrastructure potential. Michael, it's great to have you here.
Thank you, Stuart. Great to be here.
Now, let's sort of start with, at the beginning, I guess, what's the story behind RELA and what inspired you to launch this platform?
Probably about a decade ago now, one of my close friends from high school in Canberra, Stu Gorley, was working for Macquarie Bank and seeing the renewables transition up front and close. He was working on that within Macquarie, and one of the things he identified was that the grid constraints were a major factor in slowing down projects. At that time, my business partner Aaron and I, who also is a co-founder of RELA, along with myself, we were working in property more generally. I was in academia and innovation as well, and we decided to investigate the opportunity to create smaller solar projects that got around that grid constraint, but which on aggregate could still create scale. So we sort of started interacting with landowners and speaking to them about whether they'd be interested in leasing the land for that opportunity. And as we did so, one of the key learnings that we had was that a lot of landowners were saying, "Well, it's all well and good to go into a 25-year lease, but how do I know you're going to pay me over that full 25 years? What I'd really like is to get the lease up front." We sort of said, well, that doesn't really work because the lease is paid out of the cash flows of the project. So we can either buy a land or we can lease it and pay it, on an ongoing basis. But we had enough landowners then ask us that question that we started to think, well, maybe we should go and find a solution to that. And so we started to go out and consider which capital mandates would be interested in, I guess, a lease prepayment and then taking the future cash flows from that lease so that a landowner could take the liquidity from the upside, the upfront benefit at the beginning, and an institutional investor could take the ongoing cash flows, which is what they're looking for. So we then went out and we found that capital mandate, and we structured the product, and we came to really understand that the tax situation for all participants in the process and the different mandates of a landowner's cash needs versus an institutional cash need. And we built this product that we call RELA Prepay. And fundamentally what that does is takes a linear asset and allows a landowner with a non-linear need to match that asset to their actual needs. The underlying underpinning that product is the actual lease. And so what we then did is we got to know every single lease that was registered and available online. That's for projects built on the national electricity market already. We obtained those leases and read them and understood them from the purpose of being able to make that prepayment. But in so doing, we also really became leasing experts in terms of standardized terms, commercial terms, risks that sit with that lease. And then as we kept interacting with landowners who had a project built on their land and were interested in the prepayment, we started to hear all of the challenges that they'd experienced throughout the whole process, from negotiations to development to construction to operations. We started to hear about all the pain points that those landowners have gone through, and we mapped out those pain points and challenges from a landowner perspective. And I think we were really the first people to do that, to really look at this transition from a landowner perspective. And we fully mapped out and understood the pain and the opportunities, and really built the business to address all of those challenges, so that the landowner can negotiate with the developer on a balanced playing field and resulting in fair and equitable agreements and optimizing coexistence.
Okay. Now, you've taken, I guess, a complex sort of process of all contracts, leases, and sort of made it, almost like a commoditized experience, I guess, for landowners. Who else are your customers in your that are using your platform?
So our customers are solely landowners. That's who we work for. But developers are obviously a crucial piece of that platform. It's a two-sided marketplace. So while landowners are our customers, developers, banks, lawyers on all sides, even the engineers and consultants that patch into these projects, they're all important stakeholders. But really, it's landowner developer, two sides of a platform. And everything that we do is about finding alignment and win-win outcomes for those two counterparties. And you mentioned taking a complex and nuanced agreement and commoditizing it, and that's still a work in progress. The reality is that every one of these projects has esoteric details, whether it's from the project point of view or the food production point of view. What we are developing is standardized processes to work through those unique aspects.
Now, I see, and we spoke about it last time, but you've got the government you've got a partnership with the government. How did that come about?
So we've got funding from RELA, which is the federal government's renewable energy investment arm. And really, where that came about is we read a press release about a statement made by the CEO of ARENA, where he essentially said, traditionally ARENA's focused on deep tech and sort of on the consultant, the engineering, developer side of the equation. And what they're now recognizing is that for Australia to realize its full potential as an energy superpower, which is the scenario where we're, for example, exporting renewable energy to the Asian market for consumption, but even to realize our more modest aims, is impossible to achieve without the respectful inclusion of landowners and traditional owners, First Nations owners across the country. So when we read that triggered to us that we're the leaders in that line of thinking. And we'd already developed the first iteration of the landowner platform. And so we approached them with a vision for developing that first iteration of the platform into something that was more scalable and more accurate and inclusive of the entire country and adding layers and First Nations. And it was a long process. I think it was at least 12 months to go from that first identification of macro alignment to an agreed project, but that was the trigger for it.
Now let's sort of talk about what's going well. You mentioned RELA Prepay. Which parts of the platform or the model are getting the most traction?
So we've sort of got, if you think about the landowner journey through this process, that also describes our products. So the first thing we've got is the first thing a landowner needs to know is what's the value of my land to a project. And we've built the assessment platform, RELA Assess 1.0, and that's what's currently undergoing the development to 2.0. The second thing is, once you've understood the value that you've got, is how do I now connect with the right developers and the developers out there? We call that RELA Connect. That's a two-sided marketplace where the developers can then come in and see the opportunities that are there for land that landowners are offering. Then there's Transact. How do I now turn that commercial agreement into binding documentation? Then there's Manage. How do I manage my rights and obligations throughout the agreements? And finally, how do I optimize the value of what I've got, which is RELA Prepay? And I'd say that really for us, because what we described there is a continuum, you really need all aspects of that to be firing in order for it to be working. In reality, a landowner can step in and step out at any point. So some landowners don't go through our process but come just for a prepayment. That's fine. Some landowners go just for the assessment, or they go through the process to get a deal but not necessarily take the prepayment. So they can step in and out along that process. But really for us, it is many pieces of the puzzle. So for us to be firing, really the whole platform has to be firing. I'd say that right now there's probably a lot of interest in the assessment platform, simply because we've pulled together this ARENA project. We've got 17 members of a stakeholder reference group from across the landowner side of the ecosystem: landowners, advisors, government, ag tech, agricultural peak bodies and developer peak bodies and landowner advisors who are all participating in this process and contributing their knowledge to ensure that what we build represents the full kaleidoscope of perspectives. So that's getting a lot of attention, and then the prepayment also is getting a lot of attention. I think there's a feeling of uncertainty out there in the world right now, and people are seeing the value of removing risk and increasing liquidity.
So from all those products and the marketplace, I guess what are the metrics that you keep an eye
on? I think there's really like I said before, there's two sides of the market. So we're really looking at those two sides. We're looking at what landowners are coming to us and seeking our help and using our services, and then on the other hand, what's the activity with developers in terms of their demand for projects and interaction on the platform. So that's really the two things we look at. And one of the formative books for me in my contribution to RELA was The Cold Start Problem by Anthony Chen, who wrote the book about creating a two-sided marketplace and the challenges that come with that. And the really important thing for us is that there's a balance there. The value that we bring to landowners obviously relies on developers appreciating and respecting the process that we bring to them, and equally the value to developers is bringing good projects with landowners who are willing and motivated and informed in that process. So for us, a big metric that we look at is that balance between supply and demand of the land.
Now, if we can sort of double click into some of the tech, I guess, what does your product and data stack look like behind the scenes?
You're going to go very quickly.
Very high level.
Yeah, above my head. Yeah. I think probably the most important thing to understand with our technology is we are building something that has never been contemplated before. And so when we look at the tech stack and we look at bringing in AI in the future, for example, the first thing we come back to is, have we collected the right data to actually inform this technology? And I spoke with my tech team before this podcast as preparation. We sort of collectively agreed that going into the technical side is I'm not going to give it justice. What we really thought was an important message to share is what's the process by which we actually ensure that what we're building is based on the right raw data? Because like I said, we're not, if you actually think about the intersection that we're playing in, you've got food production land and you've got energy. And previously in the centralized production and distribution energy model, which was sort of the coal-fired gas plants, that overlap is pretty minimal. It's limited to a very small number of landowners or areas. And then with renewable energy, you're really essentially decentralizing production and distribution, meaning both projects and grids are going throughout the country. And so that overlap between those two sectors has gone from non-existent or very small to material. And both of those sectors are crucial in their own right from an economy point of view and from a national security point of view. And so when we look at this overlap of land and energy, the first thing that we do when we talk about building any technology is we have a systematic process for collecting the perspectives of the different participants in that sector. And only once we've really collected that data and understood that data do we start to build technology on the top of it to essentially monetize and scale those patterns and that data that we've collected, so that different participants in the market can operate from the benefit of those learnings. So I think that's really the key thing that we want to sort of share from a tech point of view. And that's when we look at artificial intelligence, there's absolutely a role for that in the future, particularly when it comes to the coexistence piece, the connection between food and energy and overlaying on the same land. But that artificial intelligence needs data to inform and to find those patterns in it. So really the focus for us is the collection of that data, and then the technology we've built really sits on two sides of the market. On the assess platform, it allows a landowner to go in, put any piece of land through either drawing a polygon or putting in the property details. It goes out and it actually then aggregates data across the grid, across the land topography itself and secondary use, etc., and across the resource, the wind and solar. And it runs that data against the same algorithms that a developer would look at to understand the relative competitiveness of a potential project on that land relative to what's already built or under planning on the national electricity market right now. And a key part of what we're adding into that is what we call the farm plan builder, which is where a landowner can then start to overlay major infrastructure, minor infrastructure, land use, productivity, so that the integration of the two uses, food and energy, from the beginning is seeking optimization. That's really the functionality of the technology from a landowner side. And then the functionality of the technology from a developer side is what we call the Connect platform. And that's essentially a platform that looks and feels like a lot of real estate platforms, where you can sort by project technology or size or location, and then a developer is able to access the projects that actually fit their mandate. And what we're looking at as a development phase in Connect is how can we start to really, I guess, create the software that helps the developers in their feasibility and DD further down the value chain rather than where it finishes now, which is more identification.
Yeah. One of the things you just sort of touched on, I guess, from a landowner perspective and developer, the size, I guess, a size of a transaction or a size of how does somebody value something? We're talking the land needs to be a minimum of, acres, hectares, square kilometres.
Yeah, look, there's probably some rules of thumb. I think you probably need 5,000 hectares for a solar farm. For a wind farm as a minimum, and maybe 500 hectares for a solar farm. So a wind farm needs a much bigger span of area, but the actual footprint will be only 2 or 3% of that area. So it's probably less actual land coverage, but over a bigger area. And so a lot of landowners will, sort of hear that and probably be put off. But of course, what we see is a lot of amalgamation of neighbours. So if you've got 1,500 hectares and two neighbours have the same, you come together and you're sort of getting up to that minimum size.
Now, like looking ahead to the future, so you mentioned AI in the future, but over the next 6 to 12 months, what are your key priorities?
I think our absolute sort of key priority is delivering the Assess 2.0 arena-backed project. That's I think the maturity date of that is the end of Q1 next year, and so we've got a really tight time frame that we're working on that. And where that's at the moment is we have 4 meetings with the stakeholder reference group throughout the project, aligning with the different deliverable milestones, the technology deliverables, where we essentially are going in and seeking feedback. We're collecting that feedback, organizing it, putting it into different categories, prioritizations, and then an execution framework. And I guess one thing to share is, interestingly, is the use of technology even in the collection of that data. So, we're dealing with people all across the country. And so using platforms that allow for breakout rooms and collaboration with different groups within that has been an important part of that process. So the absolute focus is on delivering that project. Interestingly, one of the things that's come out of those recommendations that we've been receiving is that some of them are out of scope for this project, and so we've started now to create a pipeline of desirable projects based on direct feedback and mandate from the market participants. So they'll form part of the sort of 12-month plus horizon that we're focusing on, and then the other 2 sort of key areas that we're looking at the moment is everything I've been talking about so far is software. We're starting to investigate the potential use of hardware on the landowner side, where during construction they need eyes on what's happening. Everyone benefits from that visibility and transparency of accountability from contractors and subbies and all the rest of it. And landowners sort of saying, great, we've got this lease, but how do we actually ensure that lease is recognised during what is a long-term and complex construction phase. And then the other area is First Nations, where traditional owners have the same renewable energy inputs, but then there's a whole layer of different cultural and cultural heritage and land considerations that go into it. And we're working with a number of people from the First Nations communities and representative traditional owners to better understand what additional technology layers are required for traditional owners relative to food production focused.
And something, there's a lot of challenges, I guess, in what you're building, and it's certainly a fantastic platform that you've built. What are some of the biggest challenges, or what is your biggest challenge right now? Because you've talked about technical, regulatory, market education, but what if you had to boil it down into what's the biggest challenge? What's that?
I think on a macro level, the biggest challenge is, I mentioned it earlier, is building something genuinely new. I think we're not setting up a company based on building a better mousetrap and sort of iterating on what's already been done. We're really going into this new intersection from a unique perspective, and essentially creating a new dimension of infrastructure and knowledge, and that is inherently going to take longer than you expect, and be a deeper trench to dig than you expect. That's just the reality of doing that. Anyone who's gone down that journey, I think, would share the same story. So that's a sort of macro challenge, and you touched on it with market education. I think if we look ahead 12 months, one of our key goals would be that every landowner who's participating in any way in this transition really is doing so on an informed basis. They're doing so with full set of information. How they interpret that, the decisions that they make commercially or philosophically, will be up to each person, but that they're fundamentally doing so on an informed basis. And we really see RELA in a lot of ways as an education business. We're being educated by both sides of the market, and then educating both sides of the market about that intersection. And so, I think those two things are probably the big blocks to move. Is the reality of creating something genuinely novel and new just takes more time, more effort, and more grit than most people probably realize. And we're very fortunate. We've got a great momentum, and we've got a great team of people who are really driven by the ethos of what we're doing, which is creating this balance and fair and equitable platform. But it is a big push. And then the second thing is that market education, and really realizing that education isn't contained to the 300 or 400 landowners who are hosting a project. It's really the entire ecosystem around them as well. It's their advisors, the lawyers, the neighbours, the councils. So it's a big job, of which we're one player contributing to that, but it's a big job. And I spend probably 25% of my time on the road, attending and speaking at conferences, learning and sharing my knowledge to drive towards that outcome.
Michael, I do appreciate this. Has been a really insightful chat, and it's a good reminder that land value in the 21st century is more than just soil and zoning. And I think RELA is sort of fitting into that broader climate economy really well. Like, you're opening up opportunities for landowners and developers to connect in a fair and transparent manner, and that's what it all sort of means. So, like, technology is sometimes about transparency and trust, and I think you're building something really wonderful. Where can listeners learn more about RELA or get in touch?
You can go to our website, www.rela.com.au, and make an inquiry on the website, and that'll go through the team, and we'll reach out. And our first interaction with everyone who reaches out goes back to the principle what I said. It's information sharing and gathering, and we speak to a lot of people who end up using our services, and we speak to a lot of people who don't. But everyone we speak to, we hope, comes away with a bit more information than they started. And
for anyone listening, if you want to check out what RELA is doing, you can visit the website. And if anyone else wants help with integrating smart tech or AI or automation into your stack, check us out at PropLinq AI. Thanks again, and we'll catch you on the next time.
Thank you, Stuart.